Hey guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow and I am back with another video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil energy read on Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. So if this sounds like an interesting topic to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. So I was actually not even planning on looking into these two. I mean, they were kind of always been in my periphery, but one day last week, Kurt just kind of came to me in meditation. And I was like, okay, I think somebody wants to talk. Let's see what he wants to share with me. So that kind of set me on the trajectory of looking into both of their energies, which is what we're going to discuss. I'm going to start first with talking about Courtney. Then we're going to talk about Kurt. Then we're going to talk about the dynamics in their relationship. And we're even going to go there and we're going to explore if he really killed himself. So stick around if this sounds like an interesting topic to you. Okay, so I'm first going to start with Courtney. And as usual, I have a lot of notes, so I'm probably going to be glancing down from time to time. Okay, so Courtney's energy, when I first connected to it, first I'm just going to say that this is a far from stupid woman. She is no one's fool. And part of that has to do with the upbringing that she had in her childhood. So she grew up having a lack of a core self-identity. I believe this is due to the fact that what had come in was her being sexually abused by a member of her family starting around the time when she was 6 years old. Now, I believe that this was an uncle or a close male family friend. Now, while this was going on, there was a level of additional energetic dysfunction in the house, because what I was actually able to see was that I believe her father was also a closet cross-dresser. So there was a lot of secrecy in the home. This was not a highly functional kind of environment, whereas if something was going on, family members could actually discuss it, where you could go to somebody that was older than you for help, because even the older people in the home had their own issues that they were kind of grappling with and trying to work their way through. So she was confused prior to being sexually abused, but the sexual abuse and the lack of actual familial support that she could gain thereafter compounded the issue that she was actually experiencing. Okay? And this was all going on in her formative years and in her direct home environment. So it was very confusing for her. So therefore, she grew up to have no core identity. However, she had an extremely strong survival instinct. And she grew up to be, and these were the exact words that came in, fantastically resourceful. So here we have a fantastically resourceful woman who did not have any level of familial support and who had been sexually abused, but had a very, very strong survival instinct. So she was clever as fuck. This was nobody's fool, and she could very easily navigate the world. Okay. Now, let's continue to explore the energies of the other players here. And the next person is Kurt Cobain. Now, Kurt Cobain was fantastically psychic. It's not to say that he was not fully in his body and fully in himself. He lived very much in his body, and he was very much on this world and of this world. He was just unbelievably psychic. So one might be wondering, if he was so fantastically psychic, how did he get ensnared in the hands of Courtney Love? And this is because whereas she had had a great deal of energetic dysfunction in her house that had shaped her in her formative years, he was more of a trusting soul. And when she came in, somebody that had no core self-identity, she was able to very seamlessly and easily blend with him. And again, not being a stupid woman that she was, they had a great meeting of the minds early on. So very early on, I was not detecting that there was any overt dysfunction or toxicity in the relationship. It was more, she was prone to moodiness, but he was an empathic individual. So empathically, he would try to comfort her and he would try to love her and just kind of elevate and raise her own vibration. But it was not to the extent where it was a major red flag for him. But here's also why. There was a number of other things that were going on. So first of all, there was this fantastic meeting of the minds. She was not stupid at all. She lacked a core identity, so she very seamlessly and easily blended in with him. So there was no clashing early on. And here's the other thing. She was a sexual chameleon. So she was able to bring a lot of sexual spice into the relationship. So he, early on, was very much enjoying the relationship. It was an intelligent woman that he could have these interesting conversations with, and he was having great a sexual relationship with her. There was a lot of sexual chemistry. And yes, sure, on occasion she could be a little bit moody, but that actually worked well with his empathic traits and his empathic qualities. It wasn't to the extent where he was thinking this is something that's insurmountable. It kind of made him feel like he was useful and he was helpful in trying to comfort her and raise her own internal energy. But in time, she really began to change energetically. And here's why. So when someone is a higher vibration individual, such as in this case, Kurt Cobain? Yeah, Kurt Cobain. I was wondering for a second if it was like Kirk. So just as Kurt Cobain was a very highly empathic and high vibe individual because he was fantastically psychic. So energetically, the way that these people can appear to a darker entity is the darker energied person doesn't consciously know why they're drawn to them. They're just kind of attracted to their light in a similar way that a moth would be attracted to a bright light. So energetically, she was drawn to him and flapping around him because part of the time when they're drawn to them, they're thinking this is a fantastic place where they can start to unload some of their own dysfunction. So for example, imagine if you were on vacation with a friend of yours and you had come with less things, and on vacation you had also bought less things that you were going to be taking home. But your friend, on the other hand, she had gone onto the vacation being packed to the gills in her own suitcase, and then while on vacation she had purchased a great number of things and she didn't have space in her own suitcase anymore. So while you guys are packing up to go home, she's looking at your suitcase and she's like, you've got a lot of room in there. Mind if I put some of my souvenirs in your suitcase? So it kind of works the same way. Where the higher vibration somebody is, when they are in any sort of a relationship, it doesn't only have to be romantic, but certainly the closer somebody is in a relationship, the more the lower vibration individual is going to be looking over at that high vibration individual. They're looking over there and they're like, this is a good place for me to unload some of my issues. And that is the dynamic that started to develop here between Courtney and Kurt. So he was a much more high vibration individual. She was a low vibration individual. She had a lot more baggage that she was wanting to unload onto him. He had simply more room in his suitcase to accommodate her junk. And it started to manifest in a physical way, not just an energetic way. So when something like this happens, you will actually start to discover, and maybe this has happened in your own life as well, but you will start to discover there is a energetic corruption of the higher vibed individual by the lower vibed individual. And this is where you can start to see almost like a blending, but it's not where the high vibe individual is able to energetically inspire the darker energetic person to rise with them. They get drawn down by the density and the darkness of the energy. It's an energetic corruption. So this is why you will sometimes see somebody fall, so to say, where they're changing, where they're becoming enmeshed in bad habits. And it's very much because of the company that they are keeping. So this started to manifest in a physical way in the 3D world with Kurt starting to use drugs. Now, this was a very surreal experience for him. Because again, this is somebody that was fantastically psychic. So using drugs opened him up in a further capacity and was it completely engulfed him. So whereas he still was living in the three-dimensional world, he felt like he was living in an alternate reality simultaneously. He didn't leave his body through the experience. It just completely shattered whatever delineation there was between him and the astral realm. So he was wide the fuck open through the experience of using drugs. Now, for him, this also actually affected him more than it would affect other people. Again, because of the fact that he was highly psychic and highly intuitive going into it. And this would then destroy the delineation while he was in the physical world of his connection to the energetic realm and the astral plane and divinity. So it was completely disorientating for him. But he was also incredibly creative when he was in these periods. So he was kind of torn energetically because it started to feel to him, he felt corrupted, first of all. He also was starting to feel dirty. He was starting to feel used. It was like when he would look in the mirror at himself, he was looking at himself in a dirty mirror. He was sensing that he was being soul corrupted by it. And when he would look at the world, the lens in which he would look out at it was a dirty window. Imagine you're looking out the window, but there's like poop and shit and like smoke all over the windows, and it's been raining, so there's like rain marks on it, and you're like trying to look out, but there's like a lot of this shit that you're trying to like see through to see what's going on through the outside world. So he was feeling the effects of it. And because he was also so psychic and so open, the drugs affected him and stayed in his system far longer than it would with anybody else. So he was really torn because he liked the creativity. He liked the flow of the way that he felt in conjunction to his music, but he didn't like the way it actually made him feel on a soul level. So he was very much torn and very much corrupted on a soul level, and he very much knew it too. And it was starting to bring him down. So he was really energetically being very compromised at this point and being sucked into an even lower vibration expression than he had been prior to this. Because again, if you're going to be with, someone that's a lower vibration, they are going to soul corrupt you, right? It's like, again, I'm going to go back to the example of the suitcases. So you have the lighter suitcase, so to say. Your friend has the heavier suitcase, but she is now starting to share your suitcase while you're packing up to go home. So now your suitcase has become heavier. You have a heavier load that you are starting to carry. So he was being brought down. Now, Courtney, being the opportunist that she was, and not necessarily having this sense of core identity, what was actually shown to me was that she had a child with him as a way to try to keep him there. So the decision to bring a child into the world was not, wow, at least not from her perspective, wow, I love this person so much, I want to have this beautiful thing that we can share together, that we can raise together, that we can love together, and this beautiful being that we're bringing into the world is going to be part of them and part of me. No, there was none of that. This was very clearly the opportunist in her understanding what she needed to do to keep him settled there, because he was energetically discontent. So this was very purely an opportunity for her to try to keep him trapped. And at this point, it was, and I kind of think it's funny the words that I wrote down here. It was a full-on fiesta of madness in their home. Full-on fiesta, madness. And at the point, so it's kind of interesting because at the point where Courtney had decided to get pregnant and bring a child into the world as a way to ensnare him and to further trap him, this for him was actually a great motivation to try to clean himself up. He wanted to get clean. He wanted to show up for his daughter as being the best possible version of himself that he could be. So her having this child and bringing their daughter into the world was really a big step in the impetus that he had experienced in his desire to get clean and to get off of the drugs. Now, at this point, though, Courtney went into what I wrote down as full-on attack mode. And what that looked like was, frankly, she was just a complete fucking nightmare to live with. She was highly critical of him. And what I saw was that she would either sexually shun him or she would sexually mock him. It's not really a good combination. And she would ridicule him and make him feel emasculated. And then, here's even the wilder thing. She was also having definitely at least one affair, if not more than one affair. So this really continued to shatter his sense of masculinity in the relationship because he was being shunned energetically by her. She was making him feel emasculated in his own sexuality while having sexual relationships with other men outside of the home. So this was a massive blow to him. He was experiencing a massive blow to his sense of self-identity, his sense of masculinity, his sense of virility, his sense of self, his sense of energetic identity. This was really eroding him. Now, he really wanted out. And here's something interesting that started to come through. Courtney, because he wanted out and because them having a child was really the impetus in him wanting to clean himself up, but that didn't happen for Courtney, she started to hate him. And here's why she started to hate him. Because what did I write here? Sometimes I can't even read my own handwriting. If he was able to clean himself up and to stop using drugs, despite this full-on fiesta of madness in the home, despite her very best efforts to try to tear him down, if he was able to actually clean himself up, that would prove to her, or at least through the lens in which she was seeing the world around her and she was seeing him in the relationship, it would prove that he was better than her. But if he was not able to clean himself up and get sober, then it would prove that he was no better than her. So she really was going to resent him in either way. She was going to resent him for being better than her and being able to stop using drugs and clean himself up. And she was going to resent him if he was not able to. So he was really in a bad kind of situation over here with her. Now he, of course, did not know any of this, not consciously, nor did she understand this on a conscious level. This was all going on very much in her own mind, quite subconsciously. And it was really affecting him. Again, this has come up over and over again while I was channeling the information. This was affecting him on a soul level. And every time he talked about cleaning himself up to Courtney, she would sneer at him, she would mock him, and she would somehow further exploit the energetic chinks in his armor that she had either created or she had discovered, which would further start to corrupt him on a soul level and compromise him on an energetic level, that he would then go and seek out more drugs because he didn't like the way that he was feeling. So it was a fucking shit show. Now, this would, again, every time he would discuss trying to clean himself up, it would trigger her. And her being triggered and not doing the work and not understanding, hey, this is a trigger. Hey, just like if he can clean himself up, I can clean myself up. She had too many delineations in her own self-identity and too many delineations in her energetic blueprint that this was not really a viable option for her. So she was becoming really, really triggered by all of these conversations and the way in which she would try to combat the feelings that it would create in her, these uncomfortable feelings. It was to then project all of the issues that she had onto Kurt, which would then send him into a spiral and lead him to seeking out more drugs. So it was a very nasty cycle. Now, at this point, what I was able to see was that she did not particularly like him, and she definitely did not love him anymore. And all of this, him wanting to clean himself up, her then feeling triggered and getting him to do more drugs, was then starting to make her feel really, really dirty. Because she understood on a soul level what she was doing to him. And this was triggering a massive wounding in herself. Now, here's where things got really, really interesting. As if the rest of this hasn't been interesting up until now. Something came through in Courtney at this point. And I think it was because I was spending more and more time looking into her energy, looking into the energy of the relationship, that perhaps a window to her energetic soul was open to me. Which was that, and I don't even know what this means, but this is the word that came in. She was an asset. I don't know to whom, I don't know to what end, but she was an asset. She was being used because of the fact that she did not have this soul core identity, and because of the fact that she was so fantastically versatile, because she didn't have it, she could kind of just like she seamlessly blended in with Kurt, she could seamlessly blend in with other people. And someone saw that she was going to be a fantastic asset because she had this strong survival instinct and a lack of a core identity and was fantastically resourceful. She was an asset for someone, for something. And what was shown to me was that as she was experiencing this massive wounding in her understanding of how she was energetically responsible for the soul corruption of Kurt, and in her own further soul corruption as well, that she had gone to someone, an older man, with their daughter, and she was so looking to further unload herself of her unconscious guilt that she was actually experiencing because of the energetic dysfunction that she had created and how she was able to bring Kurt down in the capacity that she had. Now Kurt was no longer a high vibrational entity, so she couldn't unload on him. His suitcase was so full, metaphorically speaking, that she could no longer unload her heavy suitcase onto him. So she had to go find somebody else that she could unload her heavy suitcase onto. So she had gone to this older man who was somehow understanding or connected to her being an asset. So she had gone to him and she had unloaded, but here's a better word, not just unloaded, she had projected and unloaded all of the shortcomings that she had onto Kurt and made it seem as if he was the problem in the relationship. Now, this person that she was unloading onto understood that she was an asset and she was of more importance to Kurt. Bad combination. And what had happened at that time was that Kurt was deemed to be doomed because she was a more viable and valuable asset than him. And energetically, it was also understood at that time. Now, here's something interesting that also came in. Was that Kurt was part of, for anyone who doesn't know, I probably should have said this at the beginning, but oh well. For anyone who doesn't know, Kurt was the lead singer in a band called Nirvana. And Nirvana came out of Seattle in the 1990s, and with them on the tails was the entire grunge movement. Now, I had very, very briefly discussed, excuse me, the grunge movement in my Ask Me Anything video, which was that the grunge movement had a bigger impact on society as a whole. And if you were around at that time, you will have remembered this. So I think when Nirvana was really starting to be like in their heyday, I believe I was about 11 or 12. And I'm going to even share with you that I was able to see in the school that I was in, the impact that it was starting to make on the other girls that were in my class. They were starting to dress grungy. Now, I went to a private Jewish school when I was younger. And while we did not have a uniform, there was certain expectations in how we would dress at that time. So we had to, to some level, dress kind of modestly, even though we were younger, But outside of that, we were able to dress in any way that we wanted to. There was no uniform. And I was watching how the way that the girls in the class, and they were also young, 11, 12, were starting to dress. So it was those flannel shirts. They were tying their shirts like around their waist and just like an overall disheveled kind of appearance, an unkemptness that came with it. So this was having a profound impact on society as a whole. And it was understood at that time that because of the profound societal impact that grunge was having on society as a whole, it was more advantageous to keep Kurt frozen in time as the forever face of the grunge movement. Now, I'm going to skip ahead for a second to kind of talk about, before we get to the crime itself, to kind of talk, to continue this idea of the grunge movement and wanting to freeze him in time. Because in Courtney's unloading onto this older gentleman, she had also made it clear that he was trying to clean himself up. And this person came to understand that in Kurt's pursuit of trying to clean himself up, he would effectively be recreating himself. And should he be able to recreate himself, being the figurehead and the spearhead of this grunge movement, that could then alter and shift the projection, or rather, I think the word is the trajectory, maybe both, the trajectory of the success of the grunge movement and how it would impact society as a whole. So because of this grunge movement, society was kind of being directed down one sort of a path. And should Kurt successfully clean himself up, get off the drugs, recreate himself, he would draw with his magnetism the people away from the path that they were on. So it was quite advantageous to forever keep him frozen in time as the face of the grunge movement. And it came in also just as Marilyn Monroe was frozen in time, and she was forever and will ever be known as the face of the blonde bombshell in Hollywood. She served her purpose by being frozen in time and not aging out of it. And he too, by being taken out, he would forever be frozen in time as well. And the seeds that would be sown into the fabrics of society of him being frozen in time would pay off dividends. There was a tremendous amount of mourning and grief around his passing. It very, very much tied the grunge movement even more into society's mind because of it. It was like a very, very notable event that anchored the identification and the energy of the entire grunge movement through his death and forever being frozen in time. Let me see if I have that. So yes, he would forever be a benchmark of the 90s and the grunge movement. So yes, it was quite advantageous to take him out, keep society anchored in some level through their shared grief of his passing, connected to the grunge movement and the societal impact that that was going to have long term. And simultaneously, they were making this asset, who is deemed to be more valuable than him, happy. Now we're going to get a little bit into what was going on with the his actual passing. So this older gentleman that Courtney had gone to had told her that everything was going to be okay, he was going to take care of it, but not to go home or not to be in that space when this happened. And that was because this older gentleman had actually gone to the home. And I believe that this is someone that was in the music industry because this was someone that was known to Kurt. So it was not unusual necessarily for him to be there or for Kurt to be interacting with him. So in other words, it was not a complete stranger. And what was shown to me was that I have a lot of notes here. Sorry, guys. What was shown to me was that he had given some sort of a potent combination to Kurt that was then, I believe, untraceable. And he was knocked out because of it. And this person was actually the person that had pulled the trigger and had actually killed Kurt, but had made it look as if it was a suicide. It was not a suicide. He was taken out. Now, what happened? Two interesting things happened thereafter. So after this came to light and Courtney understood what had happened, so I'm going to say, first of all, that I'm not entirely convinced that she knew he was going to be killed. I think there was a possibility. I think she was suspicious, but I don't think she knew entirely that this is what was going to go on. She knew something was going to happen. She knew that this guy was going to, fix the problem, so to say. And I think, therefore, she was suspicious, but I don't think she knew definitively. So the grief that she had exhibited thereafter was not actual grief or remorse for the fact that he was dead. It was actually a release of the anxiety and fear that she actually felt that she was going to be connected and tied to this murder. She thought this could have a negative blowback on her, that she could be found out, that it could be connected to her in some way, shape, or form. She was scared shitless, so to say. Because again, this is someone who is a opportunist with high survival instincts. This was threatening her survival instincts. So the feeling of threat that she was experiencing was manifesting as anxiety, but it was not being projected out into the world as anxiety. She was experiencing the anxiety, but it was being projected out as this intense remorse, not that she had killed him, but remorse that he was dead and the grief that he was gone. That's not how she felt. She was scared shitless, quite frankly. Okay, but she was scared for herself, not remorseful that he was dead, or that she maybe potentially had some sort of a involvement in his passing. Now, what was shown to me at the time of this person killing Kurt was that he was absolutely stunned when he crossed over. And because of this potent blend of whatever he had been given, he was not like entirely sure that he was dead. He just thought he was having like a out-of-body experience that was connected to drugs. So he tried to get back into his body and he couldn't get back into it. And then he was fucking floored and fucking stunned. He could not believe it. And he was then in this stunned state of understanding that he couldn't get back in, that he was dead. He was hanging around by his body and watching this gentleman, like I guess, clean up or stage the crime scene in a certain way to make it look as if it was an actual suicide. And he was just stunned. He was just like watching, like, what the? And in disbelief that he was taken out, and in disbelief in the calm demeanor and the calm manner in which this person was cleaning up and staging the crime scene. So he stayed with his body. He watched the entire time. So he stayed with the body. He watched the entire time, even as the police came. He stayed with his body as it was transported to the morgue. He stayed with his body while it was in the morgue. He just felt tethered still to his body because of the shock and the way in which he was taken out. He was not expecting it in any, just didn't even see it coming. And again, it's because he was energetically, even though he was energetically corrupted at this point, he was energetically more of a trusting individual. So then what was also shown to me, first of all, was he understood at that point that Courtney was very much involved. And she was dead to him, so to say, even though he was dead. She was dead to him on an energetic level. He did not go to her. He did not go to visit her. He did not go to spend time with her. He only went one time to say goodbye to his daughter. But other than that, she was like in his rearview mirror, never to look at or see him, to be seen by him again. But what I did see was that, so he sat with his mom at the funeral. And he chose to spend a lot of time on this side after he was taken out so he could be with his mother. He could sit with his mother. He could spend time with his mother. So very much the period thereafter of his passing was spent with her. And she never really recovered from this. She adored him. She was always incredibly proud of him for not even the contribution that he had made. So if you look at it, it's like very devoid of the way in which fans would look up to their favorite musician. The way in which she cared for him and loved him was not in any way, shape, or form connected to his output in the three-dimensional world. It was not connected to the music he made. It was not connected to the vocals on a song. It was not connected to his impact on society as a whole. The way in which she loved him was true, pure love. That had nothing to do with what he did. It had everything to do with the fact that he was just here, that he was alive, that he was her son. It was connected to his existence. And he needed to do nothing else for his mother to love him. And that, I think, to me, makes it so devastating. It's the very, very interesting dichotomy between the attention that he received from Courtney and through her soul corruption of him and energetic corruption. And in the way that he was loved so rabidly by his fans, which was connected solely to his contribution in the three-dimensional world. But the way she loved him was real love. The way his mother loved him was real love. And it was connected solely to the fact that he was alive. And then he wasn't. So she's really never fully recovered from this. Now, one could also say that on an energetic soul level, Kurt hasn't either, but he has. Because of course, when we cross over, or maybe not, of course, maybe it's not, completely known to other people, but when we cross over, we can go spend time with God, we can be healed. There's a lot of other things that can go on the other side. So our journey in connection to Earth doesn't completely end just because we've crossed over. There's a period in which we're with God, in which we're being energetically healed, and that we get to see, as if we're watching a movie, we get to kind of see like everything that had happened in our incarnations. We can decide, do we want to, come back in for another incarnation, or do we want to sit out a couple of lifetimes? Like, what's the experience that we want to have thereafter crossing out of our body? But for him, the really, really notable thing was in the exploration and seeing how a human life could mean so little to somebody. So this was really a big opportunity for him after he crossed over to go through the footage of the lifetime that he had as Kurt Cobain, and to see in the times in which he was perhaps overly trusting. So that could help him bridge the gap in his understanding that just like there's on the one side of the spectrum, highly empathic, psychic individuals that are trusting and caring and will want to nurture their partner and try to bring out the best in their partner, there is the other side of that as well. There is the soul corrupting, dark energy side of a partner seeking to unload their darkness onto the lighter partner to bring them down. And then just like there's that kind of a darkness in the world, there is a continued darkness of that where he can be taken out and was taken out strictly for the purpose of her deeming to be a more viable asset. That somehow his life didn't have meaning on its own. So I think I'm going to end the video there. And as always, as I always say, I hope that you have found this video to be interesting, informative, thought-provoking. Take what resonates, leave the rest behind. And until next time, stay in the high vibration.